Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Weighing In. My name is David Mirikitani. I'm here with my good friend, Mark Ostrander, and we are excited. We've done this show for a couple years over at Track Wrestling, and really want to first of all, thank Track Wrestling. Thank Justin Tritz. 4 years ago, he took a chance on us doing the rankings and eventually doing podcast interviews and things like that. And also want to thank the staff over there, those guys that helped us do the rankings for the last 4 years, Mark, when we checked in with them. And I really want to thank USA Wrestling, Mike Willis, Meredith Wilson, Rich Bender, and big shout out, big thank you to Gary Abbott. I've been working with Gary for several months on this. Probably the kindest way I could describe what I've done was being pleasantly persistent, and maybe more so just hassling him and hounding him about it. But I know you're excited to be on the air, so let me start with just giving you a chance to thank whoever you want.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'd like to thank USA Wrestling for everything they're doing. Anytime that you get out, social media to promote the sport of wrestling, it's a great endeavor to get into. We're going to talk about rankings, obviously, today, and we're going to be going through how much work these guys put in and year out, trying to figure it out. But everybody does it different, and I think people need to understand that. When we did our rankings, David, we had a certain way we did it. We had criteria that we looked at. Returning All-Americans was our number one criteria, and they were seated ahead of anybody else coming into the weight. If somebody moved up a weight, were they placed in that weight? We had to figure out how that correlated with how we were going to put them in to the new weight. So you're going to see everybody's rankings, and it's going to be a little bit different on everybody, but they have their own way of doing it. None of it's bad. So we're going to kind of explain things and see what we come up with.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what you said, you and me have a tremendous amount of respect for the folks at these other sources and the rankings they do. I would literally every week go through the list of matches that would come up, make sure there were no upsets, add all the upsets into a spreadsheet, and then we would go through them. We would go through them one way at a time. I would do all the collaboration of the results. And sometimes with tournaments, I'm like, hey, we just got to go through Midlands. We just got to go through Scuffle. We got to go through like Cliff Keen, Las Vegas, like those kind of tournaments. You just can't put 6 results in and move on. As far as methodology, this was the methodology that I had created, which was at the end of the year, we would literally the Monday after Nationals do the rankings for the next year. And like if you took second and the number one guy graduated, you were number one. That's pretty simple. In the round of 12, those guys all made it the same distance. It was a judgment call, and it was either based on our rankings or the seedings. Well, if we did seedings, I think one year we did seedings and we did the same thing all the way through. Same thing round of 16, same thing round of 25, same thing round of 33. That usually gave us about 20 to 25 names in each weight. Then we just weighted. Who's moving up? Who's redshirting? Who's moving down? Who's injured, who's coming in as a true freshman, all these different things. But I will say this, there's a lot of inertia. Once you start somewhere, it's hard to jump real far and it's hard to drop real far. Because if I always use this analogy, if you're beating me 14-0 and I reach back and headlock you and pin you, you're 0-1, I'm 1-0. You and I both we coached against each other. If we walked in that seating meeting, I would argue my guy seated over you because he pinned you. And technically, I'd be right? I mean, for that one match.
Technically, you would be right.
I would be right. But 9 matches later, when you're 9-1 and I'm 5-5, now it's a lot easier for you to argue that you're the better guy. And clearly was in the match, too. So what's going to be interesting this year, I think people need to be aware of this. A lot of people playing these fantasy contests and pools and pick all this stuff. I think you're going to see more lower seeds become All-Americans than ever before because there's less data points and there's less crossover. Like the Big Ten is obviously only wrestling a Big Ten conference schedule. And most of these conferences are only wrestling in conference with a few exceptions. So if you beat me early or I beat you early, there's not 24 more data points. There's 9 more data points, maybe 8 more, 11 more, whatever, but it's going to carry a lot. That early win is going to carry a lot more weight. And yeah, on that day, that guy was better, or maybe he wasn't better and just reached back and pinned the guy. but he won the match. So I think you're going to see more upsets at the national tournament than ever before. I think the seeding committee is going to get criticized more than ever before, and I don't think it's fair. I think it's just going to be more difficult to seed it because of how the season is with COVID and everything.
Well, I'm hoping just because we have wrestling right now, and if we can make it to the end of the season and have our national tournament, I'm hoping most people are just thankful that we're having a national tournament and not be so concerned on who got seated where, because like you said, and we had talked about this many times, seating committee is going to have a huge responsibility because they have such a low body of work to do their seeds with.
Absolutely. At the same time, you know how people are, like, sometimes stuff is never enough, right? Like, hey, yeah, now that we have a season, I want my guy seated as high as possible. So I think you're going to see that too. So I just did a share screen here so people that are watching can see this. If you're listening, what we have is a Google spreadsheet, and it has the first and last name, the school, the year, where the kid is ranked, what weight class, and then the next column is their average, which we'll get to, the high and low, which is what was their best and worst ranking, and then how many of the 6 services were they ranked in. And we have the open mat, inner mat, flow, track wrestling, amateur wrestling news, and Win magazine. Okay, so what we're going to do every week is just walk through these weight classes and talk a little bit about our perception of things. And then if a couple things stuck out to us, we'll talk about that. So obviously we'll start at 125. And I think the notes that I put down here before we get into the individuals are, it really feels like it's Spencer Lee versus everybody else, right? Like, I think maybe it's unfair, but will he even go a 7-minute match at nationals? Will there be a match that he doesn't bonus somebody at nationals? And the other side of that is, I think you'd rather be seated 6 or 7 than 4 or 5. That puts you on the bottom side of the bracket. It gets you away from Spencer. It gives you a chance to make the finals. And a couple of the notes I put in here are, we have guys like Camacho and Courtney, which you see right there. Like right now, Courtney's if they went by these averages, he'd be the 3 seed. He'd be on the bottom, where Camacho is the 4. But they're at schools that could potentially make a run for a team trophy. And if you can get 2nd place points instead of 3rd or 4th place or 5th place points, because once you get in the back, who knows, right? Like, weird things happen in the back all the time. So, what are your thoughts on that? And then we highlighted a couple guys here. Who are you looking at as interesting guys where there's a lot of variance or whatever you see?
Yeah, I think what we used to do the last 4 years is we put people into tiers. And hopefully the fans out there kind of understand what I'm saying. Tiers are where guys are at. Spencer obviously is in a tier all by himself because he hasn't had anybody really push him. With the absence of the Ivy League schools this year, which is a shame that they are not going to be in this, they had competition there that would have pushed him.
No Vito, no Glory this year. Yeah,
correct. And there's 2 guys right there that may not ever beat Spencer, but they can wrestle with Spencer and make it competitive.
Well, not only that, those are 2 guys that would have probably been started the year seeded 2 and 3,
correct,
which puts them on the bottom side of the bracket against each other. And if the seeds hold, one of those guys would probably make the finals.
And I guess another thing I want to make sure people understand is when you look across this spreadsheet that you put together, David, is that you'll see a lot of NRs. These sites have not ranked these guys yet. Some sites have. So we have their names in there. Alex Mackel, he has wrestled in an exhibition match. I know of one for sure that he did lose to the UNI starter, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But
yep.
So it's kind of really hard to say. I think Dylan Ragusin from Michigan he's a freshman. He's phenomenal. Placed, I think he got 2nd at the Opens.
Yeah, won the US Open. Yeah. So, yeah.
So yeah. I mean, and he's went out and he's beat some good kids early. We have him, he's ranked 10th on this sheet. And if those guys are not actually wrestling varsity, obviously that put him in the top 8. So, and when it comes to team points, being an All-American, like we had talked about, 8th or 10th, there's a big difference. You know, it's
Yeah.
2 points.
Let's walk through the math of that. So if you place 9 through 12, you get 2 points. That's just for advancement. Doesn't count pins. If you take 25th, that's 1 point. If you take 26, which you go into, that's 0 point. So literally the difference between being in the bracket and losing in the blood round is 2 points. Okay, which is not a lot. You go from 9th to 8th, that goes from 2 to 5.5. So that's literally the biggest jump besides the difference between second and first. Okay, so which
Correct.
is 20 and 16. So yeah, I mean, like I'll jump in here. Like Ragason's a kid from Illinois, Montini kid, Mikey Benefiel, Izzy Martinez. Super high ceiling, not scared to wrestle anybody. He's ranked as high as 7, as low as 14. That means they've got him scoring somewhere between 6.5 points and 1.5 points. And that's a huge difference because Michigan is definitely a team in play for the trophies. Rayvon Foley, again, between 2 and 12. He got beat by Patrick McKee. They still have him above him. But see, that's where rankings are an art and not a science, right? Because if you just go on this year, if the season ended and you go into the Big 10 seeding meeting, Patrick McKee is seated above Rayvon Foley.
Because and everybody that beat Patrick McKee that Foley did not wrestle will be ranked ahead of Foley.
Yes. So that's a great point. You know, we always call it being handcuffed or hitched to somebody. Like, yeah, you beat me. Everybody now, and we're going to get to another way like that. So we'll walk through that. The other guy that we have on here that I think is really interesting to look at is Brody Teske. Okay, so obviously I think most people know Teske was at Penn State. He's originally an Iowa kid, 4-time state champ, only lost to Alex Thompson in high school. He's Alex Thompson's only lost in high school. You know, they beat each other. And he's ranked anywhere from 5 to 32 to off the board. So I'm sure I'm going to scroll up here and see who Amateur Wrestling News, I'm sure we'll get him in the rankings because he's got some good wins. But Teske's a guy that struggled last year big time. So I don't know if 5 is an overreaction. I don't know if 32 is an underreaction. You know, kind of that 12, 16, 18 rankings kind of feels like where we would have put him, I'm guessing, if we had done it. Again, not saying anything's right or wrong, but, and this is where you can have a process, you can have a procedure, you can have structure. And at the end of the day, you're like, hey, this kid didn't have a great season, transferred, he's back home. He's from Fort Dodge. You're a Fort Dodge guy. I mean, I guess I should say that you're a national championship coach at Iowa Central that's in Fort Dodge. They have 4 Fort Dodge kids in their lineup right now. He's back with his buddies. He's wrestling, I think, like people thought he could wrestle coming out of high school where he wasn't at Penn State. And no shade on Brody or on Penn State. This just feels like UNI is a better fit for him, right? And
yeah, I think so. And, you know, he's beaten some guys that are ranked. He's starting to move up the ladder. I think it's just going to be time. Obviously, he's got a huge duel this weekend with Oklahoma State. So we're going to find out kind of where those 2 young guys fit into the Big 12. And basically, I really think the winner of that duel is going to be, you know, probably 1 or 2 seed at the Big 12s.
Taylor Lamont will probably have something to say about that as well, right?
Sure. That's why I said 1 or 2.
Yeah. Well, and Alex Mackle too. So yeah,
well, Mackle's already handcuffed to Brody Teske, and you know,
yeah, you're right.
Brody beat him. So
yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. So I mean, so you're talking about the Teske Mastro match this weekend, and that's going to be a big duel for that. So I think if you're looking like, again, if you're like starting to pick guys and you think, hey, where's the value here? If I was doing a pool, I'd pick either Spencer Lee or I'd pick somebody who's on the bottom half of the bracket. You know, like somebody that you think can make a run, because everybody else on that top half, their ceiling's probably 3rd. So,
right.
Yeah.
And, you know, one other thing I want to tell people, David and I have known each other for years, and we always have this little wing bet that we do every year, and we'll pick, 300 matches during the year, David?
Yeah.
And we don't just pick the winners. That it seems kind of easy compared to what we end up doing. We actually have to put a point spread on it, and we always have to put a half in. So, you know, if Dayton Fix is going to wrestle, say, RBY, we'd have to put a point spread on it. So it'd be, let's say, Dayton Fix minus
1.5.
1.5. Yeah. And then the other guy would choose who he was going to pick, and then the next guy would pick that. And the thing about 25, if you look at 25, and I know we're going to go to 33,
Yeah,
you know,
we got to
and
keep it moving. Yeah.
we talk about Spencer. I'm not sure.
There's no
what you
point
would put-
spread. The point spread is how long the match is going to last.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to put. And we used to do that when Zane was wrestling, when Logan Stever was wrestling. We would pick that, like it's going to go longer than 3.5 minutes or not. Yeah. Let's keep it moving because we got 45 minutes here and we got to get through 9 weights. So 133, you see the rankings here. Fix, Misic, RBY, DeSanto, Mickey Philippi, Sammy Alvarez. We got to change this here real quick. And Moses Schwartz and Brandon Patel. Now, a couple things here, like at 25, Luke Warner. I don't think Lockhaven's going to wrestle, so I think he'll come out. Brandon Patel. Lehigh hasn't wrestled yet this year. You guys, if you're looking at this, as you scroll down, you'll see multiple entries. Like, for example, here at UNI, it's got Skolarczyk in here, but we also have Biscaglia. And Biscaglia just beat Madrigal. We're not going to sort that out. What we would normally have done is combine them into one ranking, but just so people see, like, hey, they're still ranking these people highs and lows. My notes, I put, hey, at 133, it's a super deep weight. It gets a little thinner with if Misic doesn't wrestle. We don't know if he's going to stay down and train at Sunkist. Suriano, I've got on very good authority, is going to sit out this year and train for the Olympic team. Misic is in a different situation. He's actually qualified for the Olympics. He doesn't have to make the team. And that's amazing. And it's only a 16-man bracket at the Olympics. So, you know, like you have a really good chance of either making the finals or getting pulled through to the repechage and medaling. And I think all these guys are like, hey, a chance to medal at the Olympics is, you know, there's levels to the game, right? And that's it. So the guys that we highlighted here, Alvarez, for the simple point of, hey, Rutgers is starting to build depth, right? Like they can lose Suriano possibly, and Alvarez is a top 6 guy. We highlighted Skolarczyk and Biscaglia. And then I highlighted Matt Schmidt because I think Missouri's a team that's on the rise here. They had a huge recruiting year, picked up the top of the ladder, O'Toole and Elam, who have stepped in right away and are wrestling. Matt Schmidt's a transfer. He's a Missouri kid from Platte County High School in Kansas City, and he's ranked anywhere from 8th to 17th. Big difference, right? 8th is 5.5, 17th is 1. Okay. When you're a team that's trying to get in that 4, 5, 6 category, huge disparity there. So when you see this, what sort of stuff jumps out to you?
Oh, you know, obviously we had talked about this. That's why we haven't highlighted Alvarez. I think, you know, here again, we have a tier, and I think Alvarez is right on that tier. And the tier I'm talking is the top 5 guys. Philippi has beaten Dayton Fix in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So DeSanto's beaten RBY. RBY's beaten DeSanto. DeSanto's beaten Micic. Micic's beaten, you know, DeSanto. So it's kind of on any given day, any one of these guys could win the national tournament. You start dropping down, it's going to be a little harder for those guys to get in there to, you know, be in the finals, obviously. But Alvarez kind of stands out as one of those guys that could have a breakout season. You and I have no idea who they're going to wrestle. I know Biscaglia did beat the returning starter from last year in the first wrestle off, and then I think they wrestled again the other day at an exhibition, but I did not see who won that. So I think that's going to go a long ways. So besides that, Schmidt from Missouri, you know, Missouri's got a really, really good team this year. And they got a lot of guys that are just knocking on that door right around the top 12. And if they can sneak into 8th, they're going to be a team that could take home a trophy without a doubt.
They got a ton of 9 through 20s.
Yep.
And we're going to see that, you know. So we'll keep it moving. Chris Cannon's another guy that you pointed out. I don't want to skip him. When we did our prep for this, super high upside kid, Northwestern, had a good season last year. So want to give you a shout out for pointing him out early, because I think he will end up moving up and being a lot higher than the, you know, the 19.75 when we look at all this at the end, you know?
Oh, I agree.
Yep. So, all right, we'll jump over to 141. Okay, so this is a super interesting weight to me. the note I put here is just tears, but let's walk through the top 8. Ironman, Lee, Rivera, Woods, Parker, Brock, Red, and Alan Hart. We got some hammers here knocking on the door. Dom Demas, Zach Sherman, Tariq Wilson, and Dom Demas are 2 guys that stick out to me, guys that are top 4 guys at the Nationals that are now in the blood round according to these consensus rankings. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. These other guys have done stuff. I'll cheat and go first here. Alan Hart, huge jump this year. Went from 33 to 41. I watched Josh Edmond wrestle, who's a true freshman in Missouri, out in Omaha. And I'm a Missouri guy from St. Louis. Talked to Brian Smith. I was like, man, that dude's going to start for you this year. And he's like, no, Hart looks really good in the room. We're really high on him. I didn't know if that was coach speak, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know how that goes. And I thought maybe Alan Hart was going to be the odd guy out. Hey, Matt Schmidt's moving up. He's really good. This Edmond kid's really good. And he goes out and beats Ian Parker. Now, we should point out here, all the services actually have Hart ranked ahead of him, Ian Parker, except one. But they have him ranked, Open Mat has him so far down that it actually pulled his average below Ian Parker. But I think in a week or so, you could see Alan Hart up at number 5, Parker 6, Brock 7, Red 8.
Correct.
So this is probably another way to point out something. It's going to be really interesting to see how the seating committee does this when guys are in a conference. So the Big Ten here, Iowa, Penn State, Rutgers, Nebraska, right? So
Yeah.
Let's say this is how the Big Ten's finish in that order. So Chad Redd's the number 4 guy in his conference, right?
Yep.
So or even Sebastian Rivera, he's the number 3 guy in the conference, right? Does he get seated 3rd? Does Real Woods, if he wins the Pac-12, because conference tournament, conference champions are criteria, winning percentage is a criteria. So Real Woods could very easily go undefeated on the schedule Stanford has. Okay. Let's say Cade Brock beats Ian Parker and beats Dom Demas because Ian Parker's already, or Ian Parker, either one of those guys go undefeated in the Big 12. Could those guys become the 2 and 3 seed, 2 and 4 seed, 3 and 4 seed? How is that going to work? And we saw this in the past with like a Tommy Gant when there was Aymar and Nolf and him, and he was undefeated in an ACC schedule.
My opinion, David, is I think they're going to throw out all criteria for the national tournament just because of the COVID year. That
they can't throw out they cannot throw out a seeding criteria. Like they have to have a criteria.
Then it's going to be a new criteria. I really believe that, but I agree. I mean, you're going to have somebody at 41 out of the Big Ten. It's going to have 1 or 2 losses. And yet in the past, they've been finals of the national tournament, 3rd place at the national tournament. Obviously it's a stacked weight for the Big Ten at 41 with those.
Most of them are, right? 33 was as well, right? We're just pointing it out here.
It's going to be interesting. I think they're going to have to change the criteria at the national tournament. I may be wrong, but when you only have 5-6 matches in, kind of hard to do a winning percentage with that when you're wrestling the top kids in the country in your conference and the other guys are wrestling guys that aren't ranked any higher than 20 or 22. And there's some conferences like that. So I guess it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
Well, there's 2 moving bogeys in that formula that are really difficult. Number 1 is the RPI, which is and I'm a math dork. We should probably just say that right now. I'm a financial advisor. Like I love math. I love spreadsheets. Most people, spreadsheets give them the willies. But RPI is your winning percentage, your opponent's winning percentage, and your opponent's winning percentage. Okay. So no one really knows how to figure that out because it's just an algorithm or a formula. And it changes all the time. You actually want all the guys that you beat to win. Okay. I mean, that's the simplest thing, right?
Sure.
Then the other part of this, which is the opposite of that, which is no math, is the coaches poll. And the coaches poll, previous year bias is a real thing, right? Like, somebody that loses a match is going to get a lot more benefit than a guy like Teskey that didn't have a good season. So the coaches poll is a significant, I think it's 25% of the formula. So I don't think they're going to change the criteria. I mean, who knows? But I don't think they can change the criteria once the season has started. I think they could have, but I don't think they're going to do it now. But I think that coaches poll is going to have a big thing. The other thing that if people don't know this, the seeds are actually set for the national tournament based on the rubric, based on the formula. But if people are close enough, that's where the committee can argue. So that's where you're going to see it. But winning percentage and conference champion are two criteria. So that's where like a Real Woods is going to benefit here. So I think it's important for people to see. So we go Dylan D'Amelio and Etchemendy are the other two guys that we highlighted here for the simple reason, A, they're both really freaking good. B, they're on the same team. We don't know who's going to start. And C, it's Ohio State. And D, whichever one does is probably going to be in the round of 12 or 16 knocking on the door.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, 149. We got O'Connor 1, Sasso 2, Mahler 3, Llewellyn 4, Dagan 5, Murin 6, Storr 7, Mikey Carr 8, Andrew Alira's 9. The thing that pops up in my head is those top 5 names are super familiar from last year. You had Lugo in and the gang's all back together.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Top heavy, but I like the guys in 7, 8, 9. It would not surprise me. This is not, I mean, I don't know if you can do a tier at this weight. If you do, it's there's not a huge jump from one tier to the next. Alira's would not surprise me if he's in the finals of the national tournament. Obviously, with this freestyle background, I mean, he's beat some outstanding wrestlers in freestyle. And that does correlate over to collegiate style. Obviously, there is a difference, so we're going to find out. But this is a weight that to me is wide open this year. There's a couple weights that we're going to talk about that to me they're wide open. This is one of them. It would not surprise me if Boo was in the finals. Deegan is really hard to wrestle. The way he scraps, and he's 6'12", he's really tall for this weight class, and he gives people fits. Michael Carr, a few years ago, he was phenomenal. Then he had a kind of an off season, and now he's up a weight. So far, he looks good. It's going to be fun to see him wrestle this weekend against Max Murin against Iowa. See where they kind of fit in.
Big resurgence in Illinois too. Bunch of guys ranked. Following their social, depending on which service, they got 6 guys in the top 10. The thing that sticks out to me about this weight is the conference distribution. O'Connor, ACC, Sasso, Big 10, Mahler, MAC, Boo, Big 12. So you could have 4 conference champions. It's theoretically possible. It's sort of the opposite of 41, right? We're like, hey, we could just see these 4 guys and they're all going to be spread out. I think draws matter. Like Boo was beating Mahler and then got beat. Sasso's really funky. Sasso and Mahler would be a fascinating match. Like, I don't know who would actually shoot first, but the scrambles would be amazing. Yep. O'Connor is super fundamental, solid. Boo's, I think his handle is I pick ankles, and he's on your legs all day. He's also in his 6th year. He's overcome some injuries. He's an amazing kid. He was in Border Brawl a couple of years ago. So yeah. And I echo what you say about Alira's. We highlighted just a couple kids down here, and we're just got to keep it moving because we got a time frame here. But Yaya and Jay Nabis are 2 kids to keep an eye out for that are ranked 16 and 17 collectively right now, but are certainly guys with high upside. We go to 57. Deacon, Hidley, Carr, Delvecchia, Kendall Coleman, Josh Humphreys, who I don't know if he's wrestling this year, Caleb Young, Brayton Lee, Wyatt Sheets. A couple things stick out to us. We mentioned Humphreys. Brayton Lee's up a weight. He was in that mix last year with all those other guys we just mentioned at 49. Wyatt Sheets beat Caleb Young head-to-head last year. But again, Intermat's got him ranked at 12, and Amateur doesn't have him ranked at all, and that's what's pulling him down. Otherwise, he'd probably be ranked higher. The other thing we talk about ranking criteria is, do you rank guys that are injured? And I remember, I'll tell a real quick story, like Open Man, I think, has a criteria. If you don't wrestle for 21 days, they pull you out. And Andy Hamilton said, are you going to do that? This was the year that Kyle Snyder was jumping all over the world wrestling. And I'm like, I'm not pulling Kyle Snyder out because he didn't wrestle for 3.5 weeks. I go, I don't want to look like a dope. And the other thing is this is what people don't understand. If I pull Kyle Snyder out, that affects the team rankings tremendously, because now 16 or 20 points, I can't remember if he was ranked first or second that year behind Quiz, but you pull 16 or 20 points out, Ohio State probably drops 3 spaces, and that's not a fair or accurate representation of the team they're going to put at nationals, because Kyle Snyder is going to wrestle at nationals. Just because he didn't wrestle the duel against Maryland doesn't mean he's not going to wrestle at the nationals. So when you think about this, the other guy I highlighted was Corey Teamer, just super high upside guy. You know, when you think of this weight, you're a tier guy. Like, where do you see the tiers here?
3 and above is tier 1, obviously. I think if 2 of the 3 are not in the finals, I'm going to be really shocked. That's just how good this weight is. But I think you can go from 4 down to 15. Could be all Americans. So, I mean, it's going to be fun to see what happens.
It's funny you say 15 because Brady Berge, right? I think that was a conscious line in the sand he drew there. And I know you're a smart guy. I'm giving you your dap. Berge's a guy that's critical to Penn State, right? And when we get to the team race, we're going to talk about point spreads and things like that. But I think Penn State feels Berge's a top 6 guy if he's healthy and he's over the concussions. He's a former world team member. So, you know, I mean, that's something that is, he's a high upside guy for Penn State. And they have a ton of high upside guys this year, guys that haven't done it yet, but just potential. I had a coach tell me one time, potential is a French word, meaning you ain't worth a dang yet. So sounds like a Mark Ostranderism, honestly, that you would have used that.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
All right. We scoot down to 165. Mekhi Lewis, Alex Marinelli, Shane Griffith, Travis Whitlake, Anthony Valencia, Danny Bronigal, Zach Hartman, Joe Lee. Couple things here. Flo posted that Shane Griffith, even though he wrestled 74, is confirmed at 65. So he's there. A couple of the sources ranked him 6th at 174. We combined those rankings in. It didn't change where he was. It just, the gap would probably be, he'd be closer to Marinelli than he is to Whitlake. A couple guys I pointed out here. Anthony Valencia, huge recruit coming out of high school. Hasn't podiumed yet. I don't want to say as an All-American because last year they were All-Americans. This is his year. Danny Bronigal, a guy from right across the river here in St. Louis. Him and his brother, just 2 of the hardest working dudes, would walk through a wall for you and then walk back and kick it down, and had a big win last week. Joe Lee, another one of those high upside guys. Ethan Smith, he's Carson Karchlow was going to be the starter. You and me were kind of practicing these podcasts a couple weeks ago, and, you know, Karchlow, huge freestyle background, and then Keegan O'Toole, the junior Hodge winner, coming in and just putting the assassin on people and decking people left and right. A Ben Askren disciple. So what do you think about this weight?
I think it's loaded. I'm excited to, you know, and I think people need to understand, you know, to me, Keegan O'Toole's as good as pretty much anybody in this weight. I think he could be a top 5, top 6 kid, obviously, in this weight. That's just my opinion from watching him wrestle, the way he puts points up. They got him ranked at 15th, which I have no problems with him being at 15th. He's a freshman. Then people say, well, Joe Lee hasn't wrestled yet, and he's a redshirt freshman, but he wrestled college matches last year and beat some really good kids. I think that's another thing that the readers need to understand is that, you know, they have a little bit of body of work in the college level where true freshmen don't quite have that body of work yet, and they've got to build that up. And that's kind of the way you want to move up the rankings anyway, by beating the good kids above you. So I think it's going to be a great weight. I'm not sure. This is one of those tier weights where I think it's, you know, real narrow tiers. And I think
like the top 4 tier, though. Like we watched Whitlake wrestle a 1-point match with Marinelli and Carver as a freshman last year. Mekhi seems to have the perfect style for a Marinelli. We were super high on Shane Griffith. And then you look at Anthony Valencia probably down to O'Toole. These are a bunch of guys with high upside, but they haven't proven themselves yet.
Yep.
So I think O'Toole, because I was just looking at this, and I know we got to keep it moving. We got about 10 minutes left. I think O'Toole is going to be a guy that's going to be chronically underseeded at nationals because I don't think he's going to hit a lot of guys in the MAC that'll bump his seeding. So
Agreed.
we got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to keep it moving. 174, Kemmer, Massa, Labriola, Romero, no relation, Starachi, Fine Silver, Oliver. So Carter Starachi, I think we could just say lather, rinse, repeat about Joe Lee. Same thing there, right? Bullard's a guy that was ranked higher and took a loss earlier in the year. That's why he's down. Trey Munoz, Mark Munoz's son, out at Arizona State. Good recruiting job by them to get him away from Oklahoma State. And then the other one we highlighted, Dustin Plott. Plott's a kid, superstar coming out of high school, was injured his senior year, so didn't wrestle. So people, he kind of goes off the memory. People don't remember him. He actually beat Abe Assad at the junior duels. I actually called that match, and then Assad beat him at Fargo, but he's at that level. And then Mantanone is a kid, super high upside, gets beat twice last weekend, probably causing Lou Rosselli hair loss and regression, but, high ceiling, low basement. But he's only got to put it together for 2 days to be an All-American. He's the kind of guy that could make the semis, and it wouldn't shock you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a good weight. There's a lot of guys down there that could be All-Americans. It's going to be fun to see how this one shakes out. And I watched both those duels that he did lose this last weekend, but he's fun to watch. He does some stuff that, you don't see 74-pounders doing every day. So it was fun to watch him wrestle.
Well, I think if we could just get an exhibition of him and Runyon, first guy to 20 points, I think we could sell a lot of tickets to that
Yeah.
match.
And Runyon looked good. I mean,
yeah,
that was impressive. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
I think the other thing here is we highlighted Bullard, Munoz, Plott. Those are 3 schools that are in contention for a team trophy. And right now they don't have placement points according to the consensus rankings. But if you said any of those guys moved up, it wouldn't shock you. And so that can make a big difference in the team race.
Correct.
So 84, Miles Amin, Hunter Bull, and Aaron Brooks, Trent Hidley, Louis Dupre, Andrew Morgan. And then it looks like I went crazy with a highlighter here. Nelson Brands, Dakota Gear, Taylor Venz, Chris Weiler, Zach Bonigal, Sammy Colbray. This is why I highlighted these guys. To me, there feels like a tier of the top 5. Amin, Bolin, Brooks, Hidley, Dupre. I think those guys have proven themselves. I think it'd be surprising if they don't place. And if you look at the average scores, you see that. They're all between 1 and 4.5. There's a drop down to Morgan at 7, all the way to Colbray at 12. 3 of those guys are going to place. It could be more. I mean, obviously somebody below them, but if we're right that those top 5 are medalists, there's 3 slots left. Was it going to be Nelson Brands? Is it going to be Abe Assad there? Dakota Gear, critical to Oklahoma State. Taylor Venz, a guy that sometimes struggles in the regular season, but shows up in March. Chris Weiler, the transfer from Lehigh. Wisconsin does well with transfers. See Seth Gross. Zach Bronigal, another guy. He will wrestle well on the backside. He is a guy that will not quit. He will battle, and he'll beat somebody that he's not supposed to beat on paper. Sammy Colbray, Iowa State, big resurgence there. This is why I just went berserk with the yellow highlight, because I feel like it's appropriate here.
Well, yeah, because I mean, all those guys could get into the top 8, and like you said, we think the top 5 will probably stay there. So you got 3 spots that these guys are trying to fill, and I'm sure they're thinking that they can win it all. So that's the way they're supposed to think.
Of course. Rocky Jordan, Jeremiah Kent, 2 guys down there with some high upside. We go to 197. To me and to you, the craziest, most wide open weight in the tournament. Noah Adams, Eric Schultz, Jacob Warner, J.I. Yellow, Cam Caffey, Norfleet, Bolsack, Sloan, top 8. We got about 6 minutes left. So a couple of guys we highlighted here. I'm going to just talk, just for the sake of time, we'll cover some of these guys next week. let's talk about AJ Ferrari. Let's talk about Rocky Elam. Okay. 2 guys I think they literally could be in the semis or the finals of the national tournament. Opposite styles. They wrestled at 20 and unders. AJ beat him. Rocky's a grinder, Zach Elam's little brother. huge pedigree, did some EAP program at the OTC. Ferrari, everybody knows about that kid, blast doubles from everywhere.
I've never seen anybody hit a double leg off their knees as well as he hits his double legs. He actually can penetrate on his knees, and he takes these two little chop steps with his knees and can get in on your legs. And he is so strong upper body, he just sucks you right in.
Yeah.
He's going to be fun to watch. This is a weight that I had predicted early in the year, David, that you may have maybe only one or two guys that are ranked in the top 8 that place in the top 8. That's how deep this weight is. You throw the tiers out the window at this weight. I don't think there are any tiers at this weight. I think just a lot of really good kids, and if they have a good weekend. Davidson from Northwestern had a great year last year, beat some studs.
Had an up and down year. Started bad, then beat Rashid. Yeah, was a nightmare to rank. I remember that. Yeah.
Woodley, one of my favorite 97-pounders that I have seen in a while, just put a beating on a good kid from Iowa State. That Elam beat by 1 point. And we know Elam's great. Woodley dismantled him. So I think
Woodley beat Jacob Warner in freestyle too.
Yes, I think he could easily be a high All-American. So this is a weight where I think maybe you got one or two guys on that are ranked in the top 8 that I think will be All-Americans, and then I'm going to fill it in with a bunch of these guys down here. I think that's what's going to happen.
I think Mark Ostrander would say Woodley, Beard, Ferrari, and Elam will be 4 of your 8 All-Americans. I will speak for him, and he can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think he believes that. We'll jump to 285 real quick. Gable Stevenson, Mason Paris, Tony Cassiope, Matt Stencil, Trent Hilger, Greg Kirkfleet, Gannon Gremmel, Tate Orndorff, Leffman, and Schultz are 2 guys that have started out really well, especially Schultz as a freshman. He's not winning by a lot of points, but he's winning. Kirkfleet is, there's rumors he's banged up. That's critical to Penn State's success. I'm going to just jump over to the team rankings so people can see this. So right now you see like there's a tier. Iowa's on its own tier. Michigan and Penn State. This is not right here. Let's get this figured out real quick. Yeah, so there actually should be here. So we've got them at, there's a tier. Michigan is second, and then Penn State, Oklahoma State are kind of that obviously right next to each other. You got a ton of teams there. I think we talked all the way down to Iowa State and Missouri could medal this year. We'll dig into this more next week. We took about 5 or 6 minutes to thank some people, and we needed to. It's critical that we do that. So, Mark, great first show, brother. Really well done.
Hey, it was fun.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. We want to thank you guys so much for watching or listening. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We'll be in the USA Wrestling newsletter, thematt.com. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We'll speak to you all next week.